I'm Professor Walter Williams at George Mason University, Fairfax, Virginia. I think economics, the basic principles of economics, they're operable no matter where you are. I mean, there's supply and demand, and there's the effects of various laws. And I think one of the things that we need to look at in many of our urban areas, or across the United States, regardless of the ethnicity of the people, we need to look at the rules and regulations that rig the economic game in the favor of those who are and to keep the outs out. For example, take for instance in 1920s, a poor illiterate Italian, if the guy had industry and ambition, he would just go out and buy a used car and write the word taxi on it, and he was in business for himself. Now today, it's an entirely different story. That is, in order to be an owner-operator of a taxi in New York City, you have to buy a medallion. And the price of a medallion is a license, and the price of a medallion in New York City is $700,000. In Philadelphia, $400,000. And so what is the effect of a $700,000 license? Well, it tends to discriminate against anyone getting in into the taxi cab business who doesn't have $700,000 lying around or bank credit to be able to get such a loan. So this is just one example of the way the economic game is rigged against the outsiders. That is, the insiders, they want to keep the outsiders out so they can charge you and me higher fares. And it has a racial effect. That is, if you look at the percentage of taxis owned and operated by blacks in New York City, where you have a high medallion price, the number is relatively low. If you go to Washington, D.C., and where in order to get in the taxi cab business, you just have to cough up $200 or $300 for a license, the number of taxis owned and operated by blacks is considerably higher. And so racial discrimination does not explain that difference at all. It's the economic game. It's the economic rules. I would say something else about economic rules that have a heavy impact on communities like we've seen in Baltimore and Ferguson, Missouri, and that's wage regulation. And one example of wage regulation is the minimum wage law. And the minimum wage law, I think most Americans support the minimum wage law because they think it's a good idea for people to earn higher pay. But when we look at policy, we should not look at the intentions behind policy. We should say, what is the effect of a policy? And you see the effect of minimum wage law if you put yourself in the position of an employer, and you must pay $7.25 an hour to no matter whom you hire. Plus, $7.25 is not all, because you have to pay mandated fringes such as Social Security, workers' compensation, and other mandated fringes. But let's, for argument's sake, let's just stick with $7.25 an hour. Okay, so you're an employer. You must pay $7.25 an hour to no matter whom you hire. Does it pay you to hire that worker who is so unfortunate so as to have skills that would only enable him to produce $4 worth of value per hour? That is, would you hire a worker? You must pay him $7.25, but he can only produce $4 worth of value an hour. Most employers would view that as a losing economic proposition, and so they wouldn't hire such a worker. Now, so that gives you the effect of the minimum wage law. It tends to discriminate against the employment of low-skilled workers. Now, if you're an employer and you could pay the guy $4 an hour, what he's worth, then you would hire him. And then the benefit to that low-skilled worker is that he would have a job in the first place. And having a job in the first place means that you're able to gain skills that will make you a more valuable worker in the future. And that's how most of us move up the economic ladder. We get on-the-job training. That is, we start out not very skilled at all, and we get a job, and then we improve ourselves and get higher wages. And the dramatic example of that is intern. What is an intern? An intern is a low-skilled doctor. And so He has to do all kinds of drudge work at the hospital, and he's on the job. He has a job. He's gaining experience. He's learning from others, and ultimately becomes a doctor, and he earns a higher wage. Now, if you look at on so far as the black teenage unemployment, and in my book, Race and Economics, that I wrote a few years ago, in 1948, black teenage unemployment was 9.4%. White teenage unemployment was 10.2%. Black teenagers were more active in the labor market than were whites. Well, how can you explain that? Well, you can't say, well, in 1948, maybe there was less racial discrimination. That's why blacks had higher employment rates. What about saying that, well, blacks had higher skills than whites? Well, that doesn't cut it as well. What does explain it is increases in the minimum wage law that we saw take off since 1960s. It's priced young people out of the market. And I might say that the little bit of money that a teenager can earn by having weekend and after school or summer jobs, the little bit of money that he can earn is not nearly as important as the other things that he can learn from early work experiences. And these are beneficial for all kids, but particularly for black kids. That is, if you have early work experiences, number one, you have an opportunity to make labor market mistakes before you have people dependent on you. And then you learn things like, well, you got to come to work Friday even though you got paid Thursday. You have to respect your supervisor. You have to develop a good work attitude. You have to carry yourself correctly. And then there's the financial semi-independence from early work experiences that contributes to a person's sense of pride and self-esteem and self-worth. And when you have a minimum wage law, that it nixes out those opportunities, and those early work opportunities. The benefits of early work opportunities are even more important for kids who come from broken homes, go to rotten schools, live in dysfunctional neighborhoods. And so if that kid is going to learn anything that will make him a more valuable employee in the future, he has to get it through on the job, because he's not going to learn in school, he's not going to learn at home, he's not going to learn in his neighborhood. So it's devastating. And many of the problems that we see among blacks today is entirely new in black history. For example, I think somewhere between 30 and 40% of black kids live in single-parent families. That is, the majority of black kids live in single-parent households. Well, it turns out in the 1880s, 70-some% of blacks lived in two-parent families. In 1925 New York, 85% of black kids live in two-parent families. So again, the broken black family is entirely new. Matter of fact, it's probably incorrect to call it a broken family. Families don't form in the first place. The illegitimacy rate among blacks is around 75%, just close to 75%. That too is entirely new. In 1940, the illegitimacy rate among blacks was 14%. When Patrick Moynihan was writing about it in 1965, it was 25%, and by 1980 it was 56%, and it just continued growing to what it is today. And so the illegitimacy is entirely new, as well as the high unemployment among blacks is entirely new. So one has to ask, well, what is the cause? I think that the cause is the welfare state. And particularly among the illegitimacy is that if you ask any economist, whether he's a liberal or conservative, he's going to tell you if you tax something, you're going to get less of it. And if you subsidize something, you're going to get more of it. And what we've been doing, we've been subsidizing slovenly behavior. That is, it's less costly for the girl to have a baby out of wedlock. Then the social stigma associated with illegitimacy has virtually vanished. Years ago when I was a kid, Uh, if a girl made a mistake, and it was very rare, relatively rare, even in North Philadelphia, if a girl made a mistake, she was an embarrassment to her family. And very often she is sent down south to live with her relatives while she is pregnant. Uh, Today, it's entirely different. Your girls have babies out of wedlock, and then they have baby showers and things like this. They celebrate. It's no more social stigma associated with it. And so, what we've been doing, I think, as a nation, we've been subsidizing irresponsible behavior.